Greetings, humans. My name is Josh Smokey Hell Nelson, and this is The Smoke Show. I would appreciate it if you hit subscribe on whichever of the fine platforms you're listening to this on, whether Spotify, YouTube, or www.truenorthffb.com, home of the A-Team. This podcast is also presented as part of the Fantasy Points Media Group. The Fantasy Points Media Group is home of the in-your-face like 97 Mace lineup of shows, including the True North Fantasy Football Podcast, the Dynasty Happy Hour, Play to Win, Dynasty Vipers, Injury Prone Podcast, newest edition, Campus to Canton, and of course, the Fantasy Points Podcast. Follow the team on Twitter at FantasyPTSLive and watch out for the week in review threads that drop every Friday. Go to fantasypoints.com and use the promo code 21Smokey10 for the best price to the best site. You need fantasy points, they'll help you get them. Fantasypoints.com, use the promo code 21Smokey10, which helps us out a ton. You can follow us on Twitter at _smoke_show and myself at TNFF_Smokey. Without further ado, I am jacked right up to have today's special guest join us. He is the author of the long-running and best-selling Fantasy Black Book series, the host with the most boast on the Fantasy Pros podcast with his cohorts Mike Tagliere and Kyle Yates. He's on TV. He's on radio. He is everywhere on every sport. How? Because he is on that same energy wavelength as I am, baby. I cannot hold him back any longer. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce Mr. Joe Pisapia. Welcome to the Smoke Show, Joe.
Thanks for having me, man. That's a hell of an intro. I like it. And all those places I work, man, I need a nap. I'm exhausted just from all that work I'm doing. Oh, my goodness. But I am very grateful for all of those platforms that continue to employ me and put me out there. And I just love talking the sports, love talking baseball, football, and stuff. And I'm happy to be here with you, talking a little bit of everything, I think, today, right?
Absolutely. We're going to like the kind of the focus of the Smoke Show when it comes to the feature interviews is getting into not only these inspirational figures in the fantasy football industry, but people that are interesting as well. Getting into not only Joe Pisapia, the analyst, but Joe Pisapia, the person.
Mm. Well, that's nice. I like that someone's calling me interesting. You had me there.
Well, your energy is infectious. No matter what medium you're coming across, you can see your voice is palpable across. Even just reading anything like that, you have a voice and it is distinct. And I absolutely gravitate to that. And
thanks, man.
I'm sure I don't speak just for myself when I say things like that.
Well, look, I'm always grateful that anybody listens or reads or does any of the things that that I've put out there over the years, and it's been a 10+ year journey, that's for sure. Over a decade plus in this industry, starting at the bottom of my buddy Dan Strafford and I, basically, for all intents and purposes, stealing equipment from his work on the weekends and recording a podcast before it was all so easy, where everybody had microphones and computers that could handle all this stuff, and we had things like StreamYard and all this stuff. Let me tell you, it was an ordeal 10 years back in my day. It was tough to do a podcast. You had to go steal equipment and bring crap over and do it, and then it was a trip, man. And now it's so easy, which is it's tough because now everybody's got a podcast and everyone can do something, but it's I think it kind of made us want to work harder, and because it was more difficult at that time and stuff. So it's crazy how the evolution of the industry, but also the evolution of this, like us talking about it, has come so far in terms of the way we interact with each other, the way social media is, the way these streaming platforms are. It's very cool. It's way more connected than it was, I think, a decade ago, which has a lot more pluses than minuses. There's a few minuses, but it's really cool where we're at right now. I think it's neat.
It's community.
Yeah, it is.
It's a sense of community, and community, much like family, there's always going to be a couple bad apples, but we deal with them, man.
Sometimes, what are you gonna do?
Exactly, those apples get bruises somehow, But while we're on the subject of family here, you grew up in Brooklyn, surrounded on the peripherals by a sports-hungry family, and I'm super jealous of that. Do you remember your first sports-related bet that you ever made, and what were the stakes?
It's funny. Like, sports-related bets in my youth was not something I did, which is, I know, stunning. As an
really?
Italian from Brooklyn, you would have thought that, Vinny on the corner and Louis over there at the, at the restaurant working in the front. Even though I did grow up on that block, that was not something that I was somebody who played sports all the time as a kid, and even into, very seriously in my high school years. And then, ironically, my parents were into sports, but it was really my grandparents who were more into it, my peripheral cousins and stuff. And that's, kind of what happened. It was a big love of baseball. Growing up in New York in the 80s, you can see behind me, so I got like the Mets stuff back there from the 86 Mets. And that was like king, baseball in New York, especially in the 80s, that was everything. And it's funny because longer stage of my life, the older I get, I actually went from being this baseball crazy person to actually more of a football crazy person. Still love baseball, but football is like the king. And for the wagering aspect of it, I was always somebody who's way more into fantasy, and then wagering came later. And I try to remember like the first bet or things like that. Like that's actually not something I remember all that well. I played poker for a little while, and so I'm not like Jake Seeley likes to pretend to play poker, like a big fake celebrity poker guy. But as far as like betting on sports, it was something I came into, I would say, more in the last 5-10 years or something, as it became more of a legal thing. I don't know, it was maybe the stigma, or I was just more of a fantasy guy. But what's funny is the crossover between the fantasy analysis, especially when it comes to player props and things that you can wager on now. They're so at our fingertips, with the FanDuels and the DKs and all the sports books that are out there now, that you could just go on and just do this and do it in game. And I think when you have the fantasy knowledge, it helps you. Like, for instance, like I got an Otani at MVP at plus 650 this year. Put a nice fat wager on that. I wanted to do it at 20-1. I wanted to do it at 10. I waited and waited, and I got it. And now it's like minus, like 300 probably at this point. But I think that's where that crossover, which is really interesting, which I think if you're a fantasy person, you could be very careful and actually do pretty well in the wagering world. I can tell you the best wager I've ever had my whole life was actually last year. The best thing I've ever done was I got all 4 games against the spread in a parlay right last year in the NFL in the division series, and then I took the rest of the season off. I was like, that's it. I got all 4 games. I'm not going to bet on the championship game. I'm not going to bet on the Super Bowl. I should have bet on Tom Brady because he's my guy. But that was one of those things, and it's the discipline of going, well, that worked out great. Now I'm going to walk away because it can't get any better, and I'm refreshed for the new season coming up soon.
What a good feeling going out on top.
It is. Well, I can tell you all the rest of the year, it definitely made up for a very up and down year, a very frustrating year. I think everybody from a fantasy perspective with all the injuries and things, that's what's so difficult too, is the injuries didn't even just affect the fantasy, it affected your wagering too, where you'd have guys just leave games unexpectedly and big time players who make a big impact, and then you can see those lines just completely get blown up that you had really good feelings about going into the game. So it was a chore, but that definitely ended on a high note. And then you got to leave like Costanza at the end. You got to know when to get out. Always get out on a high note.
That's right. You mentioned that your passion switched a little. It swung a little in the last decade or so more to the football side. Now, was that kind of a byproduct more of the teams that you were loving in baseball, or was that more of a product of the actual sports themselves?
It's a bit of a loaded question, because as a loser Met fan, there's a lot of humble pie you have to eat. A lot in the last 20, 30 years. And I was a Patriots fan before Tom Brady was around. So I was a Pats fan going back well into the early 90s. We're talking like the Drew Bledsoe, Ben Coates, Willie McGinnis, Chris Slade, kind of, those were my teams. Curtis Martin, before he was a Jet. He was a Patriot. Let's not forget that. So like certainly there's more joy coming for football, but I think the evolution of football has been really great in the last 20 years. Whereas baseball is not the same game it was 20 years ago, or even frankly 10 years ago. You see not only the injuries pile up, but you also see the style of play, the launch angle, and we're all hitting home runs and nobody wants to steal bases, move runners over. The fundamentals are not as solid as they once were. It's a younger game, and I like the flair that the new guys have. The irony is they have some of the best young stars they've ever had, who have enormous flair for the game. The Tatis, the Vlad Guerreros, Juan Soto is my favorite guy on the planet. Otani is out of this universe. What he's doing is just insane. But the style of the game, what was so interesting is, Josh, you go back last year, and I remember during quarantine, like MLB Network would be rerunning old games from the 80s and 90s, and you'd watch it, and you'd be like, it's such a compact, tight game, and everybody who got on first was always getting checked, and it was just a totally different universe. And now, with so much swing and miss, and so many strikeouts, and so many stats that I think overload us, it becomes a little cumbersome. The length of the season is tough. I think all of that's been hard, whereas football's done such a good job of evolving the product and evolving it around, and you could chart fantasy growth and the NFL growth and then the wagering growth all in the same chart. It all kind of stems together. Yeah, and it's an easier sport for people to manage. And just from an entertainment standpoint, the way they package the stars, the way they present the format, it's great, and that's a great job by the NFL. The way they've made the draft like must see television. Like, can you imagine that? As a kid, I remember in the '80s, it was like at this hotel with a bunch of guys, smoking at the Marriott in New York City, just hanging out. Exactly, right. You get those pots of coffee, and they get remember the old NFL phones with the helmet, and they were like, the Broncos want to make a pick. What do you got? I don't know. Take that. What do you got here? I don't know. We'll take somebody. What do you care? We'll trade. What do you know? Somebody give me a whiskey. That's what it was. Like, and now it's like a party. Now it's like an event. You can cover it for 2 months beforehand, and then you cover it for like a month after. It's nuts. But I think that's the key to the NFL success is they get the sports entertainment aspect of sports, and they get that better than any other league. And Absolutely. They also, so that I think that's a big part of it.
Big time. And the way that they've woven the fans into the whole experience of everything, like they're crucial. They know that they're crucial. And if they're not crucial, they will make them crucial to an event because they can get the money. Yeah. But you have clearly shown a mastery of analysis over several sports here. Hypothetically, if you could be peak Pisapia, I'm talking like Super Soldier Serum, and succeed playing in any of the sports you love, which one, which position, and why?
Oh, let me tell you, I was a pretty good baseball player. I was pretty good in my own right. Not good enough to, play for a living or anything like that, but I was pretty good. I'm pleased with my career. Still old man Joey P, in the early 40s now, can still hit a baseball pretty far. Running around the bases and throwing the ball, it might be a little tougher, but still, maybe not as fast as I once was. But, I wasn't allowed to play football. My parents would not let me play football in high school. It was one of the biggest arguments I ever had with them, and I really wanted to play, and the reason was because they didn't want me to blow a baseball scholarship, which is ironic, but at the same time, it's kind of a bummer. So if I could go back and play, I'd want to play football. Now I play a lot of pickup football in college, and the irony is I went to art school in Philadelphia for acting, right? I went to conservatory art school, and it just so happened a bunch of us there were all ex-athlete guys in our class. And it was just weird, like a couple of ex-baseball guys, ex-football guys. So we used to go and play full-out tackle football on the weekends, and we would go crush the UPenn frat boys and the Temple frat boys, and they would think they were going to get over on us because the art school kids, whatever. And then 2 hours later, they're lying in the pool of the mud, and there we were going out for beers after. But I played quarterback a lot, and I would love to have played quarterback. Being a 5'7" guy, it's like me and Doug Flutie. That's about it. So I would have, if I could be a little taller, maybe have the wingspan of the hands a little bit bigger. I think I've got the mental and leadership capacity for quarterback. I think I got the awareness. I got the touch on the ball. All those things, all good. But you need a little bit more size to play that position. You got to see over the line. So yeah, that would be peak Pisapia. Now I want to be quarterback. I want to do that, or I'd want to play safety and hit people. Those, which I could still probably do pretty well. So those would be the two choices. That's a good question. That's fun. I like that.
That's good. I love the answer, man. That's some good thought put into that. I mean, who doesn't want to be a quarterback? That's the dream, kids.
It is. Quarterback's a fun position. I like playing wide receiver. And again, we're talking like we would play 11 on 11. Like, it was some serious stuff. In Philadelphia, it's a town where you get a lot of these, these guys coming from, different local schools and stuff like that, going to the city, going to school. But tell you, they used to leave embarrassed and wounded quite often on Saturday afternoon. And then we'd all, we'd go out and we'd hit up like the Texas Wiener, get some hot dogs after, go watch some college football, and then go out, drinking and partying all night, because that's what you do in college. And, it's like I said, you just weren't expecting it from the art school kids,
No doubt, no doubt. Well, continuing on that theme there, your background in performing arts has undoubtedly had a big influence on the way you can command a room, literally and figuratively, as I alluded to earlier with your writing. I have a sneaking suspicion it was merely an enhancement on skills that were already there. Am I right in presuming that you could always absorb the focus?
Well, the funny thing is, I worked in the acting profession for a long time, like almost 20 years, basically. And it was quite a bit as a performer, and then as a professor as well of stage combat, which is something that, because I was an athlete and an actor, something I love to do, and I ended up teaching it later in my life. And it was great fun. But it's funny, I always said this, I can't make you an actor, but I can make a good actor better. And I think you either have that weird performance thing inside you, like you'd have, right? And then you can bring it out of people and you can make it better and you can improve upon it. And then there's technique and all the other things that you can make them better. But you can't light that fire. You can't light that spark. Like, it's either there or it's not. And then some people need more work with it than others. And some people just naturally, they have this thing and then it just overtakes a room. But it's funny because people think like what I do is more talking, but it's actually the opposite. It's more listening. Even though I'm talking a lot, I think the key to any, really good host of anything that's a podcast, radio show, TV show, whatever it is, it's the listening. It's what makes Rich Eisen so good, because he listens to what they're saying and then he can take it back in and then ask the right question after and all that stuff and follow up and, yeah, a lot of it's commanding the room and commanding the space and trying to be, fun and charming and all that, engaging. And it's tough in fantasy because fantasy is, let's face it, I mean, we're a bunch of nerds, so it's kind of hard to like, you got to get like the combination of great information and great entertainment because they can go anywhere for the information, but they'll never leave you if you entertain them. And I think they keep coming back. If they can get both, then you really got something there. And it's hard because most people get into it just from the analysis standpoint. Whereas I was somebody who always did this, played the sports, was like a giant dork for history of baseball, football, all those things is fascinating. I'll watch every documentary, every 30 for 30, every football life, all that stuff. I'm just fascinated by all of the stories around the game. And that's how I always saw the game. And fantasy to me is just it's our dynamic. It's our little version of that we create for ourselves and play it out. We select the team, we select it, we create our own little drama, our own little entertainment every Sunday. And that's all it is at the end of the day. So I think we can't lose that aspect of the entertainment and the fun of it. And I think some shows do. And, some of them are so popular, but you can't also just be entertaining and fluff either, because if you don't know what the hell you're talking about, people aren't going to take you seriously.
They'll see through it pretty quickly.
They do. They do. Authenticity is key, man. Absolutely. I mean, like, you'll talk to me, I'm like, on a podcast, maybe it's just me turned up to 11, but like it's the same dude. Like, you're gonna get me like pretty much the same thing, and that's the irony. Is like I made my life playing other people, and now I just play myself, which is most of the time easier.
Sidebar: which 30 for 30 is your favorite?
Oh man, that is a great one. I thought the one on Bo Jackson was fascinating.
Yes,
right? The Bo Jackson one's really good, right?
Oh, it's by far my favorite one.
You know what else was a really fast? The Bo Jackson one, and it's a true story. When I worked for FanDuel for a year, we had a home run derby tournament out there in Vegas around the MLB championships, and they flew us all out there, and we got to take, BP with Bo, and Bo was there, and I got to hit a home run out the center field in front of Bo Jackson. It was the craziest thing. I got to do it, and he gave me the nod, like, it was good. Like, that was about all I got from him, but that was it. Like, that was like, I could die happy right now. I got a picture a friend of mine took of me on the field with Bo, just kind of like by the cage and stuff. But that one was fascinating because of what kind of incredible athlete, and they talked about the legend, which is true. Like, I think he was the last of the legendary pre-media era stuff where you'd hear these stories and then you'd see these clips, but it wasn't viral yet, So, and then when he came to the NFL and he came to Major League Baseball, I was like, what is this guy? Like, he is, and had he stuck to one thing, it's terrifying to think of how good he could be. And also the story of how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers screwed him in the draft and all those other things. And I mean, it is really a fascinating story, and he's an interesting guy. He's a very quiet guy.
Yeah.
I also thought the one about the Russian hockey team was fascinating.
Yeah.
If you ever saw that one, where they flipped the script and realized these guys weren't the villains. They were portrayed that way because of the way the media wanted to portray this David and Goliath. They were these wonderful bunch of guys that were so close and loved each other, and and it was in the, obviously the Russian regime behind it all. And they came off a certain way, but it was all about excellence. And this coach was such a loving, wonderful human. And then they got rid of the old coach and brought in this awful guy, and then they took on this whole other moniker. That was fascinating. I actually got to interview the director of that one.
Really?
He directed one or two other 30 for 30s. It was back when I was working for Sirius, and they were promoting another film he was doing, and I actually got to talk to him at length about that one. That was another fascinating one too, but most of them are great. And I don't know about you, Josh, but like what I like about them is you learn, there's things that are like, well, I don't know much about that. And then you learn like the Marcus Dupree thing. Well, I don't know much about that. I was a little kid then. I really don't remember. I remember SMU, but I don't remember like, certain things, but like certain ones where you're like, I don't know too much about that story. And then you hear about it, you're like, wow, what a great story. And I think that's what's cool is the story element of those.
Well, the fact that this sport has touched people from every walk of life,
Yeah.
the network of stories that creates. I mean, we're probably just scratching the surface. When you're talking about guys like Bo Jackson, it was almost like a mythical quality surrounded them, and it was they were just on another level. Like you tell kids about it now, and they're like, the guy from that that old school video game meme where he's just like running around,
Yeah.
guys. It's
You know,
like
it's funny,
this
Josh.
guy,
My
man.
youngest daughter, over quarantine, we have a Switch and we have some of the old Nintendo games on it, and I taught her to play Tecmo Bowl on it. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't let her use Bo Jackson first. I wanted her to learn how to play the game. And then I was like, all right, now I'm going to teach you about Bo Jackson. And like every now and then I'll catch her just playing it on her own sometimes too, which is great. And she's actually playing flag football this fall for the first time. She's super into it. She's going to be 9 in a couple weeks, but it's funny, yeah, like he's the last of
Jeez.
those weird mythological sports figures because and then he comes back and he plays baseball and on an artificial hip. like you can't even fathom like where
His
medicine
first
was.
pitch,
I know, and he's hitting home
right out of
runs.
there.
It's just nuts. Like it shouldn't be. And what he's able to do is it's just crazy, man. His legs are like tree trunks still. Like it's just
Yeah,
nuts, man. He's huge.
it's like you combine Deion Sanders and Derrick Henry,
Yeah,
and then just like beefed him up to a 13.
yeah.
It's
But he also has this weird like there's an intensity. Even now at his
yeah,
age, I remember a couple
quiet
years ago.
intensity.
There, yeah, like like if you wrong this guy, he is going to bring it to you. Like he's going to bring it.
I don't know if a car could beat him at this point, man. Like
Yeah,
he is just
yeah.
a supreme person, man. I
Hmm.
absolutely love. I'm really glad you brought up that was your favorite one, man. That's the one that captivated. That's the one that grabbed my attention the
Yeah.
most. Switching gears a little bit here, a relatively recent in the grand scheme of things development is you become a host of the Fantasy Pros podcast, man. I
Yeah.
remember congratulating you right after it happened, but I've been wanting to talk to you about it since then. The energy that you have and the way that you direct the flow was, to borrow from 30 Rock, the third heat that completes the show. I'm not calling you Tracy Morgan here, but I'm kind of saying you completed that equation. How did this all come about?
Well, ironically, I had actually applied for a position with them the year before and
Really?
didn't get one. They went in a different direction. My guess is maybe from a budget standpoint, I think they had plans of what they wanted to fit in. They wanted to add another analyst, and then they wanted to add an editor in chief, which ended up becoming Dan Harris,
Yeah.
who's the editor in chief. So he is not a podcast host. He ended up doing that because of the circumstances dictating what happened last year. And ironically, and of course I took it very well at the time. This was back in February, like right pre-pandemic. It was like January and February. And I was like, hey, it's cool, understand, whatever that, it's all good. And then, ironically, the things ended up happening and unfolding where the other host was, let go from his position. And that I was actually scheduled to do a show with Dan, who I'd never talked to my whole life.
All right.
And Dan and I were scheduled for this Game Changers pod, which is kind of similar to this, like us just
Yep.
talking about our lives and our
No, it's a
journeys and all
great
these things.
podcast.
Yeah, and he was like, "Listen, a lot of stuff going on. You don't want to take in this." I was like, "No, you know what? Let's do it. Let's move. Let's turn the page. Let's move on. I'm the perfect guy. I'm gonna take care. I won't, speak out of turn, but I'm like the perfect guy to like turn this page with because I'd been on the show so much already on Fantasy Pros at the time.
Oh yeah.
They were very familiar. The audience was familiar. I was like, let's do it. He's like, all right, let's do it. And then we did it, and we hit it off great. And by September, then this was like last summer, and then by September, he was talking to me about, hey, you're my guy. I want you to be the guy to take over the reins and stuff like that. And then in October, November, and it was refreshing to have someone come to you, But they did, to their credit, and they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse in true, Godfather fashion. They gave me everything I asked for, and the platform is huge, and I think I'm at the right point in like time and career life and stuff that I appreciate, understand the platform, the pressure that comes with it because it's a very big platform, but also Tags and I always had a relationship for years. We were always close anyway. And Yates I've gotten to know, and I think Yates is extremely knowledgeable and very entertaining, and takes a lot of crap from us, and that means if you give people crap in front of their face, that's when you're friends. It's behind your back. That's the one you gotta. When everyone's making fun of you to your face, that's what friends do. So it's been it's been really a great opportunity, and they've let me really have a lot of creative influence and control over the shows and how we do things, and that's a credit to Dan and Blaine and the team there, people. And it always was the place that I thought, I was like, I feel like I would be good there. That's a good platform for me personally. And then it didn't happen, but I left on such a good relationship with all of them through the process and over the years that it was basically just kind of like signed, sealed, and delivered for me earlier in the year, and that was great. And it's been fun. I've only been there 5 months, but it feels like forever, you know. But it's only been 5 months, and we're just hitting the stride, I think, now. And it takes a little while to like everything get on the stage. Like Dan and I do a show 5 days a week for baseball every morning, 9 to 9:30, and it is hilarious. And we have a chemistry that is you can just you kill to have with somebody, and it's just like you could just say anything and you know the other person's going to be ready for it, and it's magic. And I've done so many shows over the years with so many different people that you know exactly like when it's different and when it's just work, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can work things into good chemistry, and you have to, that's your job. But there's other times where you just like it's like lightning in a bottle, and that's definitely Dan and myself, and that's been great fun to do. And I've like encouraged him to stay around, you know. And yet, and at the same time, Josh, it's like there's still people out there going, "Who's this stupid bald moron? Where's Dan Harris hosting the show? I don't understand what's going on." And it's every day still, and you still deal with that, but you can't. What are you gonna do? Like you can't make everybody happy. You gotta just try to do the best show you can.
I think you guys are doing fantastic. And honestly, how you're saying about it, you had so many guest spots on there doing, you know, the fantasy family feud and all those things. Like I loved it. And I looked forward to those episodes where you're guesting on there. And I thought the fit was natural. The transition was seamless. I thought it was just the right fit. Like you said, it felt right. From a consumer perspective, it felt right. You feel like the right person for this place. I'm very happy you landed there, man.
Me too, man. Thanks.
It's taking it up to another level.
And it's tough. This is a tough industry, and it's funny. It's very much like acting in the same way. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody thinks they're good. And everybody can hire good free labor because everybody wants to be in it and try to make something of themselves in it and make it their job. And it's tough because of that. So it's tough to get paid. It's tough to make it a career. And those opportunities are few and far between. And look, I'll be honest with you. Like, I've never worked somewhere full time. Like FanDuel, I worked full time, but that was in 2015 for less than a year because they pulled their entire content team when the DFS boom hit bust. In 2015, it hit all the legal snags, and they just got rid of everybody. So, like, what you thought was like, oh my God, I finally sold out. This is amazing. This is going to be a great opportunity. And then it goes away. And I found out in the middle of a show. I was doing a show, Drive Time Radio, on Sirius XM Radio. And it was myself and Jeff Mans, who's a great character. Love Jeff. Jeff was and is a good friend to me over the years. And I told him, like, in the middle of a break, I was like, I think I'm off the show, Jeff. He's like, shut up, you're an idiot. What are you doing? And I'm like, no, I think it's done. And that's the thing. Like, you deal with these horrible circumstances sometimes, and these terrible things, and you know, and you think things are going well. And that's why I always went back to Black Book at the end, which was my brand and what I did, because that I could control. I could control the Black Book, the quality of it, the people who contributed, and I just threw everything into that. And then I always had that to go back to. And even times with Sports Grid, like I'd worked for Sports Grid off and on for 5 years now. And I'm still doing TV for them every Sunday, you know, and I'm still doing that. But it was the radio incarnation first, which ended up, they got rid of all the independent people at one point because it was just a business decision. And then they brought me back for a short time and did great things. And then the contract was up and they went another way. And then I came back again when they needed me during pandemic. And it's just a weird business. And I always say to people, all you can control is the work you do and the way you treat everybody you work with. If you could control that and you constantly leave a good impression with those two things, you hope that over time it works out. So that's the irony. Like, you can't control everything else. And the same things in the acting world. There's so many things that for an actor to get cast in a film or a play, who knows who's agent, who is, you know, this is a vehicle for them, who has worked with this director before. You can go into an audition and be great and not get the part, and they get frustrated all the time because they're like, what am I doing wrong? Well, nothing. It's just all these things have to happen for it to go into that direction. And then you hope, like I said, all you can control is what you do in the room. And if you can control that and you try not to get bent out of shape about it too much, you know, hopefully eventually people start to notice the good work. That's what you try for.
Well, one of the ways you've kind of done that is with the Fantasy Black Book, like you mentioned. You've become synonymous with it, and it is, it is your child. You should be synonymous with it.
It is.
But you've put together this diverse team of fantasy football Avengers with, friend of the Smoke Show, Nate Hamilton. Kind of before we continue on, Nate was actually one of the first guys that ever kind of, helped me on my way just over a year ago as an analyst, and I'm forever grateful to him, Nate. If you're watching this, love you, buddy. But guys like Nate, Tags, Derek Brown, Kate Magic, Lauren Carpenter, Michael Florio, and so many more. Like how
I've known Michael for years. Michael, when Michael was just an intern at Sports Grid. Yeah. Okay. 5-6 years ago, and was like doing the one show and like editing, crap on the side and like doing all these other million things, but they gave him a little bit of airtime, and now look, he's on NFL Network, right? And that's the thing. It's like, and I've always been close with Mike, and you love to see your friends succeed, and some people get jealous and weird about stuff too. It's like, why is that guy doing something and I'm not, and I was here before him? It's like, it doesn't work like that. No! You can take deserve and shove it up your ass, man, because it doesn't matter. Deserve is, you get hung up on that and you get lost. All you can do is do good work, support your friends, be happy for them, celebrate them, and then hope that you continue good relationships. And relationships are really important in every business. And how you treat people is really important too. And that's like, people don't get that sometimes. And I can understand people. I get frustrated too at times in my career and stuff. But you can't take it out on other people's success. This group of people is such a great group, and I've loved that we've been able to expand to more female writers, and that's what's so great about fantasy sports. It's like, it doesn't matter, male, female, gay, straight, black, white, doesn't matter. It's got a phenomenal crossover of people who just love the game. Yeah. And I think it's important to have more diverse voices in that conversation, because it makes for a better conversation, frankly.
100%. You have to get perspectives from every angle, not just, pigeonhole yourself into one sector of your, intended audience. Let's switch gears a little bit here. Let's get player specific.
All right, let's go.
The man of the last couple of days here has been Mr. Aaron Rodgers, and it has come to light.
It's a loaded question, would it me, baby?
Oh yes,
it has. Never listened to me before. There's gonna be a lot of all the feels, as the kids say about Aaron Rodgers. All the feels.
Let's just say that this is an uncensored podcast. You're free to say whatever you want.
I don't
no
work
restrictions.
blue, even in my rage. I won't do it. I won't do it.
Okay, so it's come to light that he's returning to get the band back together, including
kidding. What a
Randall
shock.
Cobb.
I can't believe it. Man, I never saw that coming.
So Randall Cobb even coming back for this last kick of the can here.
Hey, maybe Greg Jennings will come out of retirement too. I get everybody. Who else is
out there? Eddie Lacy might come in, be an offensive tackle or something. That guy's got to be pushing about 300.
It was like the worst Avengers movie ever.
This is like that 80s version of the Avengers they came out with, like Lou Ferrigno.
I love that, yeah. Like John Stamos is in it and stuff. I love that. It's the funniest thing ever. I love that. Is it Brad Pitt Thor or something? I don't know. Yeah. So good.
So getting all these pieces together for one last attempt to get past Brady. Since it's a near foregone conclusion that this is his farewell tour as a Packer, should Denver fans start getting excited, or is there a likelier destination?
Not as long as Vic Fangio is the coach, which is the whole thing I've been saying since freaking April. Man, I was covering the draft live, which was one of these things. It was like always a dream of mine. It's like I always want to cover the NFL draft live for somebody, right?
Yeah.
And I got to do it last year for Fantasy Pros, which is magnificent. And all that stuff happened, you remember, like 2 hours before.
Yep.
And I rolled my eyes, and I'm thinking, like, Aaron Rodgers is going to finish out his career with Vic Fangio. That's what's happening. So I just don't see that being his swan song. Tom Brady going to play for Bruce Arians, very different. Bruce Arians is the fun uncle of the NFL. Bruce Arians is like, hey, Tommy, you want to throw the ball 5,000 times? Awesome, let's do it. Make sure you go home for your kid's recital, though, and do all, like, he's the greatest guy ever. I love Bruce Arians, right?
Yeah.
But with Aaron Rodgers, it's like, I understand it. He felt disrespected. I get it. He's not wrong. But he's also in the same circumstance that Brett Favre was years before, which is so ironic. And it only ends two ways. You either suck it up and realize you are the older quarterback and you take less money. And to Tom Brady's credit, he always did that. Yep. Tom Brady restructured his contract every year so they could surround him with better pieces so they could win. Aaron Rodgers, not always the case. So I think with Rodgers, I'm not surprised he went back there. It's his best chance to win. I think at the end of the day, it's also a little bit of, not guilt, but I think a pull from guys like Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams were like, hey, Devontae Adams like, hey, this is my contract year. You're going to leave me with Jordan Love? You're going to do me like that? And you know what? He should care about that. Aaron Jones, another guy who was like, hey, I came back here, so how do you think you were going to be here? Now you're not. So
4 years, man.
At the end of the day, I was always in the mind that he was never going anywhere. He wasn't retiring. He's too much. He cares too much about everybody seeing him to retire. Like, this is not rocket science, folks. Like, he was always going to come back and play for the Packers this year. Now, after this year, I don't know how that all works out. But this specific year, and to tell you the truth, he probably should have been in the Super Bowl. Why they're kicking a field goal down there, I'll never know. That was the dumbest thing ever. You can't get down there with Tom Brady on the other side of that field and not take, and you have Aaron Rodgers MVP and not take another shot. What is the point? Like, how? Again, I don't understand where it comes from, why it happens, whatever. You can blame LaFleur. I blame Rodgers. Because at the end of the day, Rodgers out there in the field, he calls everybody back in and they're going to play. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, that's the command you need over a team. And I don't understand how he didn't have that command. But long story short, it's good news for fantasy owners. It's good news for Packer fans. The end is always going to come. And what you loathe, and being in this position myself, and then also living through Joe Montana going to play for, the Kansas City Chiefs, and you see Favre going to play for the Jets and the Vikings, and you see all these, they always end up somewhere else at the end of the day because they usually want to hang on longer at the dance. It's very rare that they walk away. Peyton Manning.
Emmitt Smith.
Manning, right. They always go, the greats always end up somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of how much are you letting them go with what's left in the tank. And for Rodgers, I think there's still a fair amount left in the tank. He's a healthy guy. He's in good shape. He's had some injuries, but I don't know, man. Like, I was just waiting for this just to be done. And I took all the shares I could of Devontae Adams in the second round that I could get. And the last one I got yesterday, which is great. You won't see that value again. That's out the window. But look, from a fantasy perspective, Rodgers being back is good for the game. It's good for the Packers. It's good for Jones, Tunyon, and Devontae Adams, and that's it. Forget any other ancillary piece. I don't care if Randall Cobb's there too. I don't know what the whole Randall Cobb thing is, but he's been begging him for years to get another wide receiver, and they can't get anybody else. So at least he feels like Randall Cobb understands him, and maybe they get along, and maybe they play golf on the weekends. I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to be the shot room narrative. I don't mind Amari Rodgers, man. Why not try the kid out? Kid's got some run. Bringing it back home a little bit to your beloved Patriots division rival, the Jets. Are we to believe the hype from the three rookies on the team from this year? I'm talking Wilson, Carter, and Moore. What are your thoughts on their year one outlooks, respectively?
I'm sorry, go back again for the
Jets. So we're talking Zach Wilson, Michael Carter, and Elijah Moore.
Yeah. Trey Lance was my number 2 quarterback on the board. Let me just be very blunt about that. Any question that people had about Trey Lance, to me, it's the exact same questions you could put on Zach Wilson without nearly the body or the athleticism. So I don't get it. And the Jets, I think, made a great hire. Robert Saleh, I think, is a wonderful leader and a wonderful coach. And I actually think for the first time, maybe ever, they got it right. I mean, Rex Ryan, they got the right guy for the right time, and it worked out for a short period, but you knew that was going to be lit on fire eventually, right? But the Jets' track record of picking quarterbacks has been terrible. And it's also the New York factor and bringing this kid in from BYU into New York City, from BYU to NYC is a tough sell for me. I also think if you're looking at the film of him, when you look at the film of Wilson, you see a guy who is, in those clean pockets, amazing, but you're not going to get nearly those clean pockets in the NFL. And all the great highlights of him throwing the football, man, he's got 8-9 seconds throwing the football. Like, he's just looking downfield and doing stuff. Now, he does make plays. He's a playmaker. He's got a lot of spirit. Like, I'm not trying to, be like he's a terrible prospect. He's not. He just wasn't the number 2 prospect in my world.
No.
He wasn't the number 3 prospect in my world. He was 4. And Mac Jones, ironically, I think ended up in the best place he possibly could for his career, in a place that I think is really tailor-made for what he does best, which is systematic accuracy.
They can hide any deficiencies.
Right, exactly. And he's also got that weird, goofy white guy swagger that Brady has, where he shouldn't be nearly as good as he thinks he is. And that somehow makes it matters. Like, it kind of comes off as it's off-putting. But it's the thing that made Brady great, which is he's like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm the best. Like he just kind of walks in like, dude, look at you. Like, put your shirt back on. What are you crazy? But Mac Jones has that same weird air about him, and he's not going to be
Yeah.
Brady because no one's Brady.
No.
But I struggle with Wilson. I struggle year one. I think he did a good job of bringing in Corey Davis.
Hmm.
Um, Moore, I think, has a lot of upside. If Crowder was gone, I'd like it a lot more now.
That's the thing.
But I don't
How
understand.
much
Like,
run is he going to get out of the slot?
yeah, I mean, Crowder's really good in that role
Yeah.
and very experienced. And I'm concerned that that's where at least the early lean's going to be there if Crowder can stay healthy. If Crowder was gone, I'd be very high on Moore.
Oh
Carter, I
yeah.
think, as the season goes on, continues to win out. I've never been a Tevin Coleman guy. We've talked about this on the podcast quite a bit. So for
Hmm.
me, I look at that and I say, Carter, as the season goes on, he's a really nice RB4. If you can get him there, if you can get him as an RB5, terrific. But he's a 4. Like, not quite a flex, but the guy you keep on your bench that you think has upside. I think that's where Carter is now.
Hmm.
But the Jets are in the right direction. The
Yeah.
problem is, the Bills have a franchise quarterback. I think the Patriots just got theirs. And it's a tough division right now. It really is. And their track record, like I said, is just bad. And I think they really screwed the pooch there taking Wilson over Lance. I don't know how anyone could evaluate their tape and not see Trey Lance as the better NFL quarterback. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It's not the first time I'll be wrong. And unlike every other analyst in this world, I'll tell you when I was wrong. So
I noticed you kind of trailed off when talking about franchise quarterbacks when it came to Miami. What's your thoughts on Tua
Oh,
here?
it's not even trailing off. It's like I just think we haven't. I don't think last year was fair with Tua.
Absolutely.
I think this year you're going to get a much better sense of it. I think you take last year and throw it out the window, mainly because he's coming back from a massive injury. He was in a situation where I think the locker room was against him when it happened because they were winning football games and they pulled Fitzpatrick at a weird time, but I understand why. And like every possible negative you could have, all the wide receivers were hurt. It was just a bad scene for him
Mhm.
all the way around. And he still kind of battled his way through it. Now you're in a spot where you have Jalen Waddle, you have Will Fuller, you have Gaskin looks like he can, be a player. You have depth. They'd made some adjustments to the offensive line. Hopefully it could play
Mhm.
better than it did last year. It's still pretty low rated in PFF. But I don't think it's fair yet. It's not fair yet to call Mac Jones a franchise quarterback, but I've watched enough Patriots football in my life to know I still think there's a small chance you could get him week 1. I really do. I mean, Cam Newton was awful last year. Absolutely wretched. Like, he got by in those first couple weeks, I think, because most teams just weren't prepared. And then once everybody got prepared, they were like, well, this is all they've got. And they need to do a better job of getting more playmakers there. But I think for Tua, this is a year where you start to see whether or not they have their franchise quarterback. Because I think Tua did a lot of great things in college. I think Tua has a lot of ability, and Tua has a lot of belief in himself. And you kind of knew Tua was going to bounce back from this injury and all that stuff. But last year, no OTAs, no preseason, injury, locker room against you. I mean, jeez, how much crap can one kid deal with? And I think he dealt with it in stride pretty well. So we'll see what happens. And I like their coach too. I think Flores does a nice job there.
Oh, absolutely. And I hope, who knows, maybe this adversity has pressured him into becoming the diamond quarterback that
Maybe.
Miami's been lacking for a while. Not that Tannehill was bad. He was just not, case.
Well, that's the thing. You look back at the Tannehill, Tannehill made incremental improvement year over year. And I remember writing about this a couple years in the Black Book a couple years ago. And I was like, look, Tannehill does a lot of good things. And I always write the quarterback profile still, even to this day. Because to me, if you understand the quarterback play, then you understand everything. Like, once you have the quarterback play and you understand the offense, you understand how it runs, you'll understand how a trickle effect in fantasy goes. And Tannehill, you could see it. You watch it in the film, you watch it in the games, you see it in the stats. It's like he's making small improvements, but he just can't overcome the stupidity of Adam Gase and the play calling and the personnel and all of those things. And as soon as he went to Tennessee, I remember I was like, you want to talk about like wagers and things like that. I remember, I think it was on a Fantasy Pros podcast actually, where I said, well, why was it a bold prediction? It was like, Ryan Tannehill takes this job and runs with it away from Marcus Mariota. And at the time, that was kind of a hot take. Like,
It was.
what are you, crazy? I'm like, he's going to run away with it, never look back, forget about the draft capital of Marcus Mariota. Tannehill is going to be the guy. And he was. And 2 years later, here we are. And now look at him. He's got Julio. He's got A.J. Brown. He's got Derrick Henry. And he's consistently in that middle tier of QB1 last 2 years in terms of performance. The dude just gets it done. Like, he's not great. He's not perfect. But, man, from a fantasy perspective, he's productive.
Yeah, and the way that he's used, that's all he has to be.
Right.
So if he can continue that, I honestly, I love Tannehill's outlook this year, and I am very sad that I have very few shares in the 24 or so leagues that
I
I am
just
in.
got one today.
Oh, well done, well done.
That same one where I had so it was this it's a charity league for 5 Yard Rush, which is a great podcast. The English guys.
Oh yeah, over in the UK, love
Murph
those guys. Murph
love
and them,
those
yeah.
guys. They're so great. But I was in where am I? The 8th spot. Ugh, I hate in the middle of drafts, but I got Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, Montgomery, and Tannehill. So that's the super flex. The quarterback runs have been weird, but I'm real happy to go, to take Tannehill as a, I did it in the CBS mock a couple weeks ago. I was in the 12th spot in the super flex, and I took Wilson and Tannehill to start, then took Najee Harris and Montgomery, and then I think I got CeeDee Lamb and T. Higgins. So I was like, well, this is going my way, just double tapping at 12. And that's the thing. It's like, and we just did a mock episode right before I got on with you. We were doing a live stream for an hour on the mock episode. And, drafting from the middle is tough. At the end, you can control stuff. In the middle, you're at the mercy of all the runs back and forth. And, you can't steer the draft. You basically have to react to it. And it's much harder to be in the middle than on the ends.
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of funny. I found most of my drafts this year, I've been on the turns and stuff, whereas last year I was mostly in the middle. And yeah, it's a little tough sledding because, like you said, you got to be a reactionary instead of you. It's hard to start a run when you're in the middle of a freaking round.
You can't do it. All you can do is continuously look at the board, take your best guess, because you'll see crazy like we just did this first round, 5 running backs in a row. Then it came to me. It was Elliott or Chubb. I was like, ugh, I'm like, not in love with this. I'm going to take Adams, right? Then 9 running backs went in a PPR after that. Ooh. And it came back to me, and I was like, well, Mixon was gone, Harris was gone. I was like, well, screw this. I'm not taking DeAndre Swift here or any of the other guys. There's no value there. No. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was gone. Najee Harris was gone. All those guys were gone. And I ended up just taking Hopkins. I'm like, well, this is going to be a different team. It's going to be a team
lean
built
into the
on
value.
Wide receivers, right? And this is why relative position value in the Black Book helps people understand this, because when you don't take players that are negatives. Take players that move the needle, and then go figure out where the value is later of guys who can outperform their draft capital and their draft slot. Because I'm going to have 2 wide receiver ones, the number 1 wide receiver potentially in all the NFL, maybe the number 2 guy. That's the way to build a team. And I got Kyler Murray on this team too, on this mock, and I was able to make it work.
Ooh,
the running backs were Chris Carson and ETN, which is okay.
Not terrible.
It's not terrible, but you're going to have deficits. So why chase negative? Go keep looking for the positive players, the players that are above fantasy league average at their position, the guys who do move the needle. Build core roster strength, which is something in the Black Book I try always to drive home. Build core roster strength. Build it, and then you worry about filling the spots. That's the biggest mistake people make. Oh, I need a tight end. I need this. No, you don't. You don't need a tight end, because after this guy, they're all crap. Like there's a tier of Kelsey, then there's a tier of a couple guys, then there's that weird middle, which really don't move the needle for me. I'd rather just take a couple shots on guys late, and the Jarwins and Jonus and the Cole Kmet kind of guys, and see if I can get a couple of those guys or one of them to hit. And if so, then I've made up that deficit. But everybody's going to be mediocre at tight end, except the person has Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle. Like everybody else in your league, the other 8, 9 teams are going to be in that same kind of realm,
Yep. Yeah, so you got to take that value. I love that. Admittedly, I said before, I'm in a couple dozen leagues now. I'm a fantasy degenerate, full out. And I love it. I've
said yes to way too many leagues this year, but at least some of them have been best ball, where I'm like, okay, I'll do your best ball thing or whatever, because then I don't have to manage it and stuff like that. It's easier.
And that's the thing. There's a good chunk of my leagues that are now best ball, just kind of converting over to that. Have you done any leagues with like super crazy scoring for different positions and stuff like that? Do you see kind of trends going forwards that way?
Because I think those are, and you know what, and this is the whole point, and this is what's nice about RPV is all you do is you just take the concept and then you just drop it into whatever the scoring is. You take the formula, you drop it into the scoring, and then you have a working model of, oh, this is where the value is. I don't play in any crazy things. The craziest thing I play in is actually a roto football league, which has been going on for 9 years. It's a bunch of industry people. And it's IDP also.
Yeah.
And it's 2 quarterback, 12 team roto football. So what's interesting is like you can go in with different philosophies. So, and actually the first year I was in it, I actually won it and that was the year Adrian Peterson got suspended, and he was my first pick, and I was like, ugh. But
No!
then I know, and I was like, well, this is over before it starts. But I learned very quickly. I took a shot on a kid named Andrew Luck, and that worked out. And then, you're like, okay, I can live again. I can figure it out through quarterbacks and wide receivers, or I can, get the most out of the linebacking core that I have to start. And like, you can win categories that way. And it's funny because I hate roto baseball, but roto football is fascinating because it just opens up all these different things that are a part of the game that we never really touch on very much, because most people don't play IDP, or if they do, it's a very small, sample size, like maybe 1 or 2 players sometimes. But
yeah, no,
that's about the craziest league I play. I tend to stay away from the goofy things, and I just at this point, I love Superflex though. That's my jam. Like, to me, that's the ultimate challenge. That's where the ball should be, because the quarterback position is the end all and be all of the NFL. Therefore, why isn't it the end all be all fantasy? I've been pushing this narrative for 10 years in the book that Superflex, it should be more of a thing. And you know what? To people's credit, it's become that over the last 5 years. And I like to think that Black Book was kind of at the forefront of that, because we were really pushing that years and years ago. Like, we're talking like 2015, I'm pushing like, why isn't every league Superflex? Look, why are we fighting over 98-point running backs when there's 200-point quarterbacks on the waiver wire? It makes no sense to me. And these people who play 10-team leagues and they play one quarterback, I'm like, what are you doing? It should be mandatory 2 QB in a 10-team league. Push the envelope. Challenge yourselves. Have a bigger player pool that you're drawing from, even if it's only a 10-team league. That's how you get the most of the fantasy experience, and you start to learn more. And it feels like it's starting to get that way. You see these dynasty leagues, most of them are Superflex now, which is great.
Yes.
That seems to be the trend, and that's very cool, because that seems like the way people want to take it, and I feel really good about where that future is of those leagues.
Well, that's the way it should be. In my books, Superflex should be the default setting for anything. Why are quarterbacks the most important position in real football and in fantasy football? Why are these guys being devalued? They should be put up on the pedestal that their egos sometimes feel that they deserve. But make them matter. If they're putting up those kind of points in your scoring, why? I mean, could you grab a guy like Keenan Allen off the waiver wire? No, barring injury, no. So why could you grab a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Ryan Tannehill off waivers? Yeah, that's a ridiculous statement.
Well, especially if I said, you're going to start an NFL franchise, right? Who was the first 5, 6 picks, or even 10 probably off the board, are probably quarterbacs, right?
You think someone's going to take a running back first overall?
No, of course not. No. You can't even get them to take him in the first round of a draft. Almost like pulling teeth, right? Some of these guys, right? So. Yeah, it's so bizarre to me, and it's nice to see that and that's another great thing about football, where it's leaving baseball behind, is it is evolving. Whereas the baseball people, it's a very traditional old school mentality. It's hard to get them to accept new things, and I think that's to its detriment at times, and it's to the benefit of the NFL at times.
Absolutely, you have to evolve your product if you want to stay current and relevant with your consumer base.
That's right.
Speaking of bases, I think we've covered them all today, man. I cannot thank you enough for coming out of this interview. I'm going to open up the floor to you. Plug everything possible. If you can remember everything that every pie that your fingers are in, man, drop it on the people.
Sure. First of all, this was really fun, man. This was a fun conversation, and I appreciate like the format and it's being different, and us talking more big ideas. We also got into some players and stuff like that too, which is cool. It's a really you talked about before the show, you're trying to do something different and unique, and you did it. So good for you, man, because it's hard to find different and unique out there and good. You hit all 3, brother. Let me tell you, it's good. You can follow me on the Twitter machine at Joe Pisapia 17. You can listen to me and watch me on all the Fantasy Pros podcasts for baseball and football. You can also check me out every Sunday on Sports Grid. Doing diamond bets right now. Been a couple weeks that'll go to Fantasy Sports Today for all your NFL coverage from 8 to 10. 2 hours of fantasy football every morning with me and Matt Stryker and Craig Mish, a great group of people. And I'll be our 3rd or 4th year doing that show, or I'll be doing that show. It's a different cast, but I'm always there, which is great. Can't get rid of me. I also host a wrestling show just for fun in this ring. Yeah! Because I love wrestling. That's my... Tags and I laugh because it's like, he writes the primer and then like, what do you do for fun? I write a novel, he says. and I say, what do you do all day? You host podcasts. Like, what do you do for fun? Well, I host a wrestling pod for no money. I just like doing it with my buddy Nate. And then, of course, the new Fantasy Football Black Book is out there on Amazon right now on paperback and on Kindle. And you can get on Apple Books as well. And we do the updated RPV, so if you're buying it now, make sure you get the updated one. But I just did an update for Michael Thomas in the paperback last week. That's the nice thing, when it's on Amazon, I can update things, so when people buying it later in the season, they're getting the Cam Akers stuff right, and the Darrell Henderson stuff right, and the Thomas stuff right, which is, the magazine stuff that's out there can't do. And we're also giving you something different, which is real strategy, not rankings, not tiers, quantified rankings and tiers. So you can actually understand, you can actually go into all your formats and all your different leagues, everything from NFFC to Superflex to Best Ball, and you can go in Dynasty and crush it, because we're that one book. We got 150 IDP rankings. We do stuff that nobody else does, because, like you said, we're all playing different formats. We're all different. You're in 24 leagues. We're all degenerates, right? So you need one book that's going to give you something you could use for all of it. So that's what we're trying to be. Like Lord of the Rings, the one book to rule them all. That's what we're
Absolutely love it, man. That's fantastic. That's it, man. It's been my supreme pleasure to have Joe Pisapia with us on the Smoke Show today. Please subscribe so you don't miss a single interview or episode. This has been brought to you by the TNFF Network, home to such other podcasts as the Gold Jacket Podcast, the Point After Podcast, and the Jet Sweep Show. This podcast has also been a presentation of the Fantasy Points Media Group. My name is Josh Smokey Hell Nelson, and I thank you for joining us today. Joe, all I have left to say is, where there's smoke,
there's fire, baby.
Yeah, buddy.